Okay, we are going to get started. Hi, my name is Tom Pukish. I'm the president of the Wayne Economic Development Council. And today we are in collaboration with my partners from the Orrville Chamber of Commerce, Lori Reinbold, and representing the Worcester Area Chamber of Commerce, Justin Starlin. Justin and I will be facilitating this the conversation throughout. But I do want to welcome everybody. This is our fifth installment of what we're calling COVID Conversations. We're bringing a series of webinars. These have ranged anywhere from our first one. We had our congressman talk about the CARE Act, and we have had conversations on the Paycheck Protection Plan, employment law, keeping employees safe, and now I feel like we're getting to seeing some light at the end of the tunnel with actually reopening Ohio, reopening our area. So today we wanted to have a conversation with that. I'm going to have Justin introduce our speakers. However, before he does that, I do want to welcome everybody to ask questions. This is for you to find out information and get your questions answered. So throughout this, if you are on the Zoom meeting, please either through the chat button, or there's a question and answer, or there's a question box too. You can fill out either one of those. If you're watching YouTube live, then you can just email myself, Justin, or Lori, and we'd be happy to read your questions over the air. So I want to welcome everybody. And Justin, can you introduce our speakers?
Yeah, Tom, thank you. And thanks, folks, for logging in today on a Friday afternoon. We attempted to put this together pretty quick, and without the speakers today, be willing to accommodate our late request, it wouldn't be possible. So thank you to Dan Calvin. He is a member at Critchfield and Johnston. And then also on the call today, it will be Nick Cascarelli. He is the Wayne County Health Department Health Commissioner. He's here today to answer any questions you might have. One thing going into this, I know Tom talked about the chat and the Q&A. Please feel free to use that feature. If we don't get to all those questions in the live session, we will do our best to get you those answers. It's amazing how Dan and Nick are accommodating with answering questions. Also, obviously the information is fluid. Things are changing consistently. So this is our attempt to answer the questions with the information that we have today. So appreciate you being here. Again, Q&A and chat if you have questions, and I'll kick things over to Dan to start the presentation. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks, Tom and Lori and everybody for getting this set up. You guys have been a tremendous resource for your members, just a ton of information you guys have been pushing out over the last 6 weeks or so. So we certainly appreciate that. This is a pretty timely presentation. The order came out around midnight last night, so we've had about 14 hours to try to digest this and get the information together here. So as Justin said, it's fluid. We're moving pretty quickly here. So bear with me. Let's get my technology here. All right, so just a brief agenda here. So we're going to go through introductions again. Going to talk a quick overview of the legal landscape. We're going to talk about the Responsible Restart Ohio program. Again, the order that came out late last night, Governor DeWine and Dr. Acton. We'll talk about the guidance that's out there from the CDC and from OSHA, talk about potential legal liabilities, and then kind of leave it open for any updates from Nick from the Health Department, as well as a Q&A for everybody. So as far as introductions go, like Justin said, I'm Dan Calvin. I'm an attorney at Critchfield, work in our Medina office. We've got 5 offices, about 40 attorneys spread out through those offices. I live in Medina myself with my wife, daughter, and dog, and that's about it. So over to you, Nick.
Yeah, I should say good morning, but it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Wayne County's Health Commissioner, as Justin had said. I'm a resident of Worcester with my wife and 3 children and 1 dog. So. But yeah, on today's, if you guys have any questions, certainly as much as possible, we love to answer those for you. Sorry, I lost my voice a little bit. And then just the other thing, just so that everybody knows on the call, we're going to work with the businesses. Certainly this has been a difficult time for for businesses, especially those who are non-essential and actually had to close. You know, asking somebody to give up their livelihood temporarily is not an easy ask. So, you know, I certainly certainly appreciate everything that the business community has done up to this point, and have had a big part in, you know, flattening the curve. You hear a lot about that. So I'm going to stop now, though, because I want Dan the opportunity to give you all that information, and then towards the end again, you know, we can certainly talk about health department response and you know, especially with these new orders. And, you know, granted, as Dan said, they're brand new. So, I mean, a lot of it is still left over from the older stuff, but the Responsible Ohio, the Restart Responsible Ohio piece is kind of the new piece for the new order. So, great, Dan, I'm going to go ahead and give it back to you for now.
Thanks, Nick. So it wouldn't be a presentation from a lawyer if it didn't have a disclaimer at the start. So, you know, while we would love to represent all of you and your companies, we don't necessarily, and this is not intended to be legal advice or create an attorney-client relationship. So again, we're just trying to share this information as quickly as possible here, get it out to you, and then, you know, if you have additional follow-ups, we encourage you to work with your counsel on that. The other thing is the guidance is changing daily. We've seen, for an example, on masks, about 4 different iterations this week on that. So, you know, you got to keep updated on this stuff. So today's rules are really for today only, and they're subject to change all the time. So I'm sure the chambers and WEDC will continue to push out updates as there are material changes to the rules. So as far as the legal landscape here, so we've got a few different levels here. So we've got at the federal level, we've got to talk about OSHA and we've got to talk about CDC. So CDC and OSHA, they're kind of working together to put out some guidance for businesses. And then OSHA will really be the big enforcement arm there for the federal government. And at the state level, we've got the orders from Dr. Acton, including the order that came out last night. And then at a local level, we'll have the local departments of health with additional rules, guidance, clarification, and some enforcement too. And you know, we'll talk through that a little bit with Nick as well. All right, so probably what's on everybody's mind is Responsible Restart Ohio. So we'll kind of talk through all these different things here, but scheduled reopenings, continued closures, responsible protocols, and then we'll just touch on a couple key points from the industry specific requirements. A lot of that's the same for the different industries, but there are a few key things to focus on here. So as far as the scheduled reopens, we got today's May 1st. We've got dental, vets, doctor's offices, and non-essential procedures that don't require an overnight stay. On Monday, we'll have manufacturing, distribution, and construction, and then general office. And then on May 12th, which is next Tuesday, week and a half from now, is consumer retail and services. And one thing I wanted to point out here before we go any further is there was a bit of a shocker that came out in the order last night, and that is having to do with retail. And so that is currently closed retail establishments can open starting tonight at 11:59, so long as they restrict operations to curbside pickup, delivery, or appointment only shopping that is limited to 10 customers at a time. So as far as I know, that's the first we've heard of this. It came out, like I said, last night. And I think that could be big for a lot of our local retailers. You know, we've got Mother's Day coming up next weekend. This really provides an opportunity for us to get creative on how we can do this appointment, you know, in-person shopping by appointment only. I think that provides a good opportunity for a lot of our members here. The one other thing on this, businesses are only allowed to open. This isn't just automatically you can open. You're only allowed to open if you can meet the safety and social distancing requirements in the order. So if you don't have, you know, hand soap and you're not going to socially distance and you're going to ignore the rest of the rules, you're not necessarily allowed to open. We got to do it smartly. We got to do it according to the rules set out in the order. Continued closures. I know everybody's heard a lot about this week, but restaurants and bars, personal appearance and beauty businesses, entertainment, recreation, and gyms. A little bit more on those: swimming pools, camps, campgrounds, fitness centers, workout facilities. All of those remain closed. Not sure how long that's going to last. The order last night goes through May 29th. So I think that might give us an indication that that's when it's going to be reevaluated again, but remains to be seen. Things are changing on a daily basis here. So in addition to the new 5 responsible protocols and the industry specific protocols, keep in mind that the same rules from the prior order remain in effect for social distancing. All of these here. So washing hands, covering coughs and sneezes, disinfecting, designating 6-foot distances with signage, tape, etc., hand sanitizer, all of those things, encouraging online and remote access, all of those, again, remain in effect. And we've got these additional things that are kind of layered on as we get reopened here. So these have been dubbed the responsible protocols. So there's 5 of them. Go into a little bit of depth about a few of them here. So number 1 is face coverings. And this has kind of been the ping pong ball back and forth this week. We've been, they're required, they're recommended, they're required, and now we're kind of somewhere in the middle. So here's where it all shook out. So as far as customers and clients, the rules say that they should wear face coverings, but it's not required. The governor said several times this week, highly recommended. That's the phrase he keeps saying over and over again. If we can have them do it, that's better for everybody, but it's not going to be a requirement. For employees, the face coverings must be worn while on the job, except for these specific exceptions here. Prohibited by law, violation of documented industry standards, not advisable for health reasons of the employee. You know, they've got trouble breathing, they've got asthma, they've got anxiety, that kind of thing. Violation of a company documented safety policy, an employee working alone in an assigned work area. So this is another thing that changed in the order last night. So everything we had been seeing all week is that the exception was going to be for employee working alone in an enclosed workspace. So that language changed from enclosed workspace to an assigned work area. So that broadens it a little bit, but same kind of thing. If somebody's sitting alone in their office or their cubby, it's not so much required that they be wearing the mask during that time. And then the last is the functional practical reason why an employee cannot wear a face covering. If asked, this says it right here in the order, is if asked by anybody, probably Department of Health or the state or something like that, the company will need to provide a written justification for which exception an employee fits in if they're not wearing a mask. And I'm going to kick it over to Nick here to see if he has anything else to say about face coverings or anything like that.
Again, actually, I think you handled it well. Face coverings, what they want to make sure is that you're covering nose, mouth, and chin. So it's not specific to a mask per se. Mask is kind of the easy go-to, but any kind of face covering, fabric, as long as you're covering your nose, your mouth, your chin. And then the asterisk at the bottom of Dan's slide, we may ask on occasion as we get complaints as they come in for some type of written justification for that. Again, this is brand new. We haven't worked everything out on how we're going to approach this, but this may be just like when we did essential, non-essential. We had asked businesses to indicate to us. We even set up a new email, which many of you have done, to indicate to us why you were essential under what category. So we're going to kind of do this similarly, but we'll do it more based on complaint, not just a broad ask like we did, which all the chambers were very helpful in getting that message out to us. But on this particular one, we're probably just going to look for those, mainly more complaint driven rather than just casting a broad net like we did when we asked the businesses to indicate, why they were essential. So, yeah, to Dan's point, this was the ping pong ball this past week with the governor. So, but I'm glad we got the clarity and it's in the order. So then that way, us as a health department, we can move forward with that. So I didn't know, is that everything you wanted me to touch on that, Dan? Or
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to say is that it's important to note that these new rules, these 5 responsible protocols and the industry specific stuff, these apply to businesses even if you were deemed essential. So this isn't just for businesses that have been closed. If you were open all along, these rules apply to you as well. So keep that in mind. Don't just ignore this. If you've been open and doing the handful of original social distancing things, these new rules apply to you. So the next one is conducting daily health assessments. So getting a lot of questions on this. So the CDC has recently updated its list of symptoms for COVID-19. So it used to just include cough and shortness of breath, but now they've added these other symptoms, fevers, chills, and all these other ones here. So the Ohio guidance that's been issued this week says an assessment should include taking temperature, watching for cough, and trouble breathing. But it's also good to keep in mind these other symptoms if you're going to be doing a health assessment. So just to clarify, the rule does not say that the employer is required to do the health assessment. It says that the employee is required. Now the employer can do a health assessment. I've got several clients that are doing that right now, lining up people before a shift starts, before they let them in the building, and they've got an infrared thermometer, and they shoot the forehead and give them a thumbs up to go in, or temperature's too high, got to go home, that kind of thing. You can do a questionnaire. Do you have cough? Do you have shortness of breath? That type of thing. It's totally up to the business owners, but that is not at this point a requirement. And Nick, anything else you want to say on health assessments?
No, I mean, I think, again, you covered it pretty well. I know that we, at the health department, we're doing the health assessment, doing the temperature taking upon arrival. If the business has the capability to do it, I would recommend it that way. What you don't want happening is you don't want your business to become a hotspot, I guess, because then we'll get into a whole host of other things that, Dan will get to later on in his presentation in terms of reporting and, quarantining employees. So, but yeah, it doesn't specifically say it's not incumbent upon the employer to do that, but if you have the capability as an employer, I think it's a good idea to do that. So I guess that's really all I have to say. If there's another piece of that you think I'm missing, Dan, I'll be glad to.
Nope, that's perfect.
And there were some people said they couldn't hear me, and if you could text in the chat box if you were one of those people to see if it might have been too far away from the screen. I want to make sure people are able to hear me. So if you could at least, just let me know you can hear me better. So thanks.
All right, so moving through the rest of these protocols here. So maintain good hygiene, social distancing, hand washing. That's, we're all kind of well versed in that. Clean and sanitize workplaces thoroughly throughout the day. A lot of things we're hearing from people is, yeah, that's great. I've got to clean and sanitize, but I can't find anything at the stores to clean, and everybody's out of Lysol wipes and that type of thing. So the Ohio Department of Health put out this publication here, which I think is helpful. While you may not have Lysol wipes and that kind of thing around, bleach is always a good thing to use. So go get yourself a big thing of bleach and a bucket of water and follow their instructions here, and that's a good way to help disinfect. But I'm sure the chambers and the WEDC are hearing that a lot from folks too, and everybody's trying to do their best to find masks for people, to find cleaning supplies, to find hand sanitizers, all that kind of stuff. So if anybody out there has, found a great source for that, feel free to share it with your fellow business owners here, so we can all maintain clean places of business. And then the last one is limiting capacity. So the guidelines have said to establish a maximum capacity at 50% of the fire code. you don't know what your fire code is, call the fire department, look on your occupancy certificate. You know, it may be posted near the entrances or exits in your building. But that information should be readily available from somebody. So you should be able to find it. And at this point, I'm going to kick it again back over to Nick to talk about a little bit about, you know, what happens when you've got somebody with symptoms, what happens when you've got, you know, a confirmed case in your workplace, and what to do then, and contact tracing and that type of thing.
So when we get a report, and if it's from you as an employer, or oftentimes it's from, you know, medical providers when they do a test, and it comes back positive. One of the things we do, as Dan indicated, was a process called contact tracing. And with contact tracing, what that is either a communicable disease nurse or an epidemiologist, and that varies depending upon the health district. Some have both, we have both, some may use one or the other. They basically get with that would be, in your case, the employee, to try to ascertain any close contacts that can also be exposed, that may have been exposed to this particular employee. So at that point, when we're doing the contact tracing, we establish that with the employee, and then we work with the person who's identified as a close contact. Obviously, in a work environment, we will certainly work with HR, being protective of HIPAA as much as possible. Obviously, we need to do that as well. To see if maybe there are other employees that maybe should be off the job and be placed into self-quarantine. Once that occurs, typically it's a 14-day period from the last exposure to the person who was positive. So, but if you had a person that worked next side by side with somebody, determined that they were a close contact, and it was 3 days ago, we want that person off of the job for at least 11 more days. And each case is different. Obviously that's just kind of general rule. And then what will occur from that is we'll want that person to self-monitor their temperature daily, at least twice a day. Once a day, we'd like a call in to report that, just to kind of let us know, to make sure that the temperature is not going up. So that's what the contact tracing is. The shutting down piece of that last check mark, we've actually not got into that. Sometimes that would be, especially if we had a large outbreak at a business, we would be working with the business on that, or it may have to be regulated by some other entity in terms of needing to shut down and shutting down the shop or the floor for that deep sanitation. But then you can certainly work with our environmental division in terms of, we can certainly give you some, some advice on cleaning, and then obviously with the reopening. Now, we've not actually had to do any of that, and let's hope we don't even have to go there with that. But certainly, if we have to, we will. We'll work with you. I think one of the things in general, just to kind of as a general statement, we're going to work with businesses. This is not about being punitive at all. It's not the health department wanting to, as Dan indicated to me, like a gotcha thing. That's not what we're interested in. What motivates us, and even if you are already currently regulated by us, if you're a business that's regulated by us, our thing is about educating. It's about working with businesses to make sure they're making smart decisions so that their employees don't get sick and potentially make a larger population sick. That's really what it's all about. And in that regard, this is not much different than when we do anyhow when we're regulating business entities. I think you'll find, for the most part, our environmental staff, our sanitarians that do the inspections, and that are also kind of charged with this piece. Wow, people can't hear me. I see. Barb, can you hear me better now, Barb? I see a chat from Barb. This is the first time on this. I've used Zoom several times, obviously, since this. This is the first time. Can you hear me better now, Barb? Because Barb, I seen, had chatted in.
I think it's just a little echoey, Nick.
Okay. So, but yeah, just as a general rule, we're going to work with businesses on this as we do any other type of situation where we're regulating entities, whether it's a restaurant or any other body art shop, anybody else that we regulate. It's going to be the same thing. We're based upon, we want to educate the businesses. We don't want to be punitive. It's not about being punitive for us. Because ultimately we want to prevent people from getting sick. So whether it's COVID-19 or a foodborne outbreak, it's really the same thing in that regard. So we will work with you on this list. If you have a person who's sick, and if it does require all the way down to shutting down a shop or a floor, we'll work with you on the cleaning of it and work with you on reopening it as soon as possible. So.
Thanks, Nick. And I think a couple big things that Nick touched on there are education and communication. So that, that's going to be important for the employers as well. I don't think it would be good to assume that your employees are well versed in COVID-19 and social distancing and that type of thing. The onus is really going to be on the employers to educate with signage, with as much information as possible to tell their employees the right thing to do. And we'll see when we get into kind of the OSHA and CDC guidance on that. OSHA does really put the onus on the employer to make sure that they are educating and communicating with the employees. So this is a lot of requirements here, but it can be done. And I was talking to a client of ours yesterday that I think is doing things right here. So I'm gonna share that example. So the client is Return Polymers over in Ashland, and so I was chatting with him yesterday, and he just ran through the laundry list of all the things that they're doing over there, and I think it's some good ideas that would be helpful for this group here. So they're talking a lot again about 6-foot spacing as much as possible. They're just driving that point home. They've distributed walkie-talkies to employees to cut down on that face-to-face communication. They've closed down all entrances except for one. So all employees, when they come in for their shift, they go through a single entrance. There's an employee standing out there with a infrared thermometer that takes everybody's temperatures as they come in. And once it comes back that it's 98 degrees or whatever, then they send them through. Then they come in, they start lining up in this queue here because a big issue is the time clock. When it's the shift change time and everybody's running to the time clock, you got 30 people all going to the same spot from different directions, kind of monitoring the traffic here. So they've got this queue set up, 8-foot, space in between these dots. Everybody stands on the dot, they go through, they punch in on the time clock there. Adding some spacing to the break room. That was what they did initially. And then the final thing they did was they got this big tent for the parking lot and shut down their inside lunchroom. They've got this set up out in the parking lot with these special cubbies for everybody, and they've run some power out there for a microwave and that type of thing, and a couple other interesting things that he's doing. Everybody's either got a face mask or a shield. One of the questions was about plastic shields. That it didn't make sense for that particular person to be wearing a face mask as they do their job. So they had some shields. Doing all employee interviews and orientation over video. Non-operational employees are still working from home. Adding external porta potties and hand washing stations outside for drivers that are either picking up or dropping off, deliveries. They're cleaning all common equipment after every use. They've got a cleaning crew that comes in on shift change and cleans the common areas. They've pulled doorknobs off they're propping open all the doors that can be left open. They've taken the doorknobs off of the other doors and added foot pools. So just a kind of a laundry list of different things, and be creative here, but keep in mind the common the rules here, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just trying to limit contact with those surfaces and keeping people appropriately distanced. And by the way, he gave me permission to share that story, so I didn't just share his confidential information or anything like that. So again, getting into the industry specific requirements here. So I don't want to dwell too long on these, but there are a couple important ones to point out. So in the manufacturing space, as far as employees go, staggering or limiting arrivals of employees and guests, change shift patterns, stagger lunches and break times. Those are important. In the physical spaces, daily deep disinfection of high contact surfaces, regulating the max number of people in cafeterias and common spaces. And then over in the recommended bucket, if possible, close the cafeteria and those other gathering spaces. Or at the very least, good signage in those areas, markings on the floor, telling people what being 6 feet apart is, and that type of thing. In the general office environment, reduce sharing of work materials, limit travel as much as possible. Like I mentioned, we've got 5 offices. So, we've got a policy here that there's no travel between offices because, we don't want anybody to get sick, but if we've got one person sick in one office, we don't want them taking that to another office. So try to limit travel between your offices as much as possible. Posting signage on health safety guidelines. So again, communication and education. This is a requirement to be posting signage for employees and guests about social distancing, hand washing, all of that stuff. As far as physical spaces, move desks apart. Don't have people within 6 feet of each other. If you can put people in separate offices, fantastic. If that's not possible, then make sure they're not, staring at each other 4 feet away. Let's get some separation between people. On the consumer side of things, again, signage is a big thing. You're going to ask customers and guests not to enter if they're symptomatic. A big sign near the entrance would be nice on that. Specifying hours for at-risk populations. That's not a recommendation, that's in the requirement bucket. So if you've got a retail establishment, then you should be setting aside specific hours for at-risk populations. And those are obviously elderly, we know that. And then it's people with chronic lung disease, serious heart condition, immunocompromised, severely obese, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and chronic liver disease are those that are identified in the order that came out last night. Okay, so that's it from the state level. That's all I really wanted to talk about on the stuff that's come out this week from the governor and from Dr. Acton. Again, it's been a little bit of a moving target, but we do have a specific order in place now, but all that's subject to change, and I'm sure will continue to be tweaked. Now, on the federal level, the main player here is OSHA, and really what they're looking at is that the employer has a duty to provide the employee with a workspace that is free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So that's really the standard. If you get an OSHA issue, that's really the standard that OSHA is going to be looking at. And OSHA has issued industry-specific guidance for construction, for manufacturing, package delivery, and for retail. And I anticipate there will continue to be more guidance that's issued on those. The CDC and OSHA have kind of worked together to put together best practices. And here in a couple slides, you'll see the link to that. And so I encourage you to flip through that when these slides go out. When I think Justin and Tom were thinking about circulating these, but if they do, you'll see that link. And that's helpful. It's an easy resource to look at. You can just kind of flip through and get a flavor of what they're talking about there. So really that guidance falls into 3 big buckets. The first one being to reduce transmission among employees. And that's encouraging sick people to stay home, instructing employees that if they have close contact with somebody that's infected with COVID, they need to isolate for 14 days. Social distancing, education, communication. The second big bucket is maintaining healthy business operations. So this is implementing flexible sick leave and other supportive policies. So the big thing on this is we don't want to have policies in place that encourage somebody that's sick to come to work. And I know that's hard and that's ripe to be taken advantage of, but the last thing you want is for somebody that's infected to come to work and take out half of your workforce, because then you're just going to have to shut down again. So keep that in mind to the extent that you can put policies in place that encourage people, again, when they're showing symptoms to stay home and kind of monitor the situation. The other thing is cross-training employees for essential functions. Be prepared for people to get sick. So if you've got things that absolutely can't be done by more than one person, you better start training somebody else to do those jobs in case the first person gets sick and has to be quarantined or in the hospital or anything like that. The third bucket is maintaining a healthy work environment. So this is improving building ventilation rates, placing posters around, encouraging hand hygiene, providing soap, water, hand sanitizer, disinfecting, all of that stuff. And again, here's the link to that full OSHA publication, which like I said, it's pretty user friendly, and it's a nice thing to flip through if you can. So as far as legal liability, where is it coming from when we talk about coronavirus and we talk about reopening places of business safely? So the first level is really the health department, and that is, Dr. Acton's order came out last night, and the penalty for violating that order is a second-degree misdemeanor with a maximum fine of $750 and or 90 days in jail. So I don't know how often that's going to be used. I don't know what the statistics, that is the same penalty from the first time around, the essential businesses order. So I don't know if anybody was prosecuted under that or not, but again, keep that in mind. I think probably the more likely scenario is an OSHA issue. And again, you've got a duty to provide a safe workplace for your employees. So I think the most likely way this plays out is you get an employee that complains to the health department and then possibly to OSHA. And when OSHA gets a complaint, you better believe they're going to come out and investigate it. So OSHA is going to come knock on your door and say, we got an employee complaint and we're here to check it out. So a little bit of advice on what to do if OSHA comes knocking. Don't let them just wander around your facility. Be polite, be respectful, sit them down in an office, answer their questions, call your attorney, call counsel, get some advice on it, but don't let them just wander around. OSHA has the right to cite you for any other issues they see in plain sight. So while they might be showing up just because somebody complained that people weren't wearing masks, if they come in and they walk all around your facility and you've got, machines don't have guards on them and different things aren't in place, they may walk out after issuing you a laundry list of citations. So just tread carefully if OSHA comes knocking on that. The other thing is workers' comp. This is probably a little lower risk, but if you've got an employee that gets sick, they may try to make a claim and say that was a workplace injury, that they got the sickness from work. This is going to be a little harder to prove. The worker has the burden of proof to show that the sickness came from work, and assuming that the employee is not just going from home to work, never going to the grocery store, never going out with friends, that might be easier to prove. But if they are doing all these other things, it's going to be hard for them to show that the sickness did come from work. Either way, it's better to try to minimize sickness so we don't have issues like this pop up. And then there's always the risk of lawsuits. People always ask me, can I get sued for this? The answer to that is always yes. Anybody can be sued for anything by anyone at any time. So, whatever we can do to minimize the lawsuits. If somebody gets sick, an employee or customer or guest or whatever, we just don't even want to go down that route. You may not end up having liability at the end of the day, but anybody that's been in litigation knows it's stressful, it's time consuming, and it's expensive. So let's try to avoid that at all costs. These aren't legal considerations, but other considerations is think about public image. We're in the social media age, and I've heard, some grocery stores and other places, getting bashed on social media if they're not doing the things they're supposed to be doing. So keep in mind, it may not just be your employees. It may be customers that come in and they see, we want to instill confidence, and if they're not feeling that you guys are doing the right thing, then they may, take to social media to complain about things. And then the other thing is, keep in mind that this isn't going away. This is going to be around for a while. So if there is a flare up, what they're calling hotspots, because businesses are reopening and not doing it safely, and people are spreading the sickness throughout a factory floor or something like that there could be future closures. So we want to try to avoid that. We're getting reopened here, and we don't want to be shut down 2 months from now because we didn't do this right. And that's everything from me. So at this point, I just want to go back out to Nick there and see if you have anything else that you want to add, or any other updates from your office that you want to share with the group.
No, other than I just wanted to reiterate kind of the same things I'd already indicated earlier. Look, we're here to work with the business community. We're not into being punitive. On the first go around, nobody got fined or put in jail, even though that's part of that could be a potential. We did have to order or write a letter to cease operations for 3 non-essential businesses. But this is a little different. This is not non-essential versus essential, unless they're a place that's still supposed to be closed as this rolls out. So again, we just want to work with everyone. We don't want to be punitive. Even though we have an enforcement side to what we do, not just for this, but for all of our other regulated pieces and parts that we do here at the health department, we're really more about education, because the ultimate goal is to keep people safe and healthy, regardless of what we do at the health department. We really have 2 big roles in this pandemic, and one is on our clinical side, to stop the spread of this disease, is doing the communicable disease investigating and doing the contact tracing. And then the other side is enforcing the stay-at-home order with the Responsible Restart Ohio rollouts to make sure that we comply with those and enforce those properly. So we're going to work with you. We don't want to be punitive. It's not about that. Certainly, there's always that, when should things open, and then we can get into that. But the main thing is that we want to work with everyone. We're not about being punitive at all. I mean, we have that as a tool, but that's one we really don't want to use. We'd rather just work with you. And if you do have someone sick and you have to send them home, and we do get a report that they were COVID-19 positive, we certainly will work with your HR departments, because we want to keep the rest of your employees safe. As Dan also said, we don't want half your workforce out, because many of you could probably not operate with half your workforce out, especially if you're not rolled out yet and once you start to get back to business. So that's pretty much all I had. I did try to answer some of the chat and the Q&A questions. You could certainly get in touch with me. You can call the health department 330-264-9590. My personal extension is 207. And I could certainly get that out to both the chambers if you have any questions. There were some questions that were, again, this thing just came out 14 hours ago. I've had meetings all morning. I really haven't had a chance to get into the fine parts of the Responsible Restart, and especially I just noticed this morning where they added that piece on the retail. Had no advanced knowledge of that, about being able to open up tonight for the curbside stuff. So, we're learning it at the health department most of the time, just as you're learning it too. So, but my commitment to you, we're going to work with you.
And Nick, this is Justin. Maybe we can we appreciate the fact that you're being open to understanding that businesses are trying to do the best they can. So we just appreciate your approach on being business friendly. So thank you for that. There is a couple questions here. I know Patrick had a question. The order talks about face coverings. I don't know if you went into detail on this. Does the face shield qualify as an acceptable face cover? Did you cover that, Nick?
It really all the face covering needs to cover the nose, the mouth, and the chin.
Okay.
A face mask is, I'm not sure if they're talking about the face shield, which goes over the eyes. That's actually not in there. When I think of face shield, I think of those like what they use in in medical procedures.
Sure.
But the face covering could be, and some people actually even like bandana type things. As long as you're covering your nose, your mouth, and your chin, we're that as far as I'm concerned, that's in compliance.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess my 2 cents on that is that that's probably pretty good. I mean, there was a picture earlier in my presentation about, a full plastic shield, all the way from the forehead down below the chin. I think that that jives with the spirit of what we're trying to get at here, and kind of reducing those droplets or viruses from getting from person to person.
And that actually might even be superior because you're covering your eyes, which could be another potential place. I mean, mainly it's the mouth. It's the whole thing with covering the face or having the face mask or the is really about protecting everybody else more than it is you. You've probably heard about, if you've never heard about them before, but you have now about, N95 masks and surgical masks and procedural masks. The N95 masks, which are the ones that are hard to get now, obviously, those are the masks that are going to protect you from getting things into your mouth, into your nasal passages. So when you hear the governor and you hear the director, if you watch any of their 2 o'clock briefings, the reason for even, recommending customers on the customer side of this, where that was one of those flip-flops that Dan talked about this past week, is originally everybody had to wear a mask. Then it was just recommended. And then they said now required, which we see now, the latest iteration, employees are required to wear them, but not necessarily customers. I'd really like to see it where customers were wearing the face coverings, because if we're all protecting ourselves from everybody else, that'll certainly do a lot to keep the spread of this virus down. So, whereas what we're asking, and I shouldn't say were, but what the order says is that once like the cloth or the procedural or the surgical masks, those are really keeping your germs from getting out. So.
Hey, Nick, this is Tom. Just for a clarification as well, like in an office environment, we had somebody ask a question, and I'm kind of in the same boat. If you're in an environment where you have 10 people or less, in your building, and they are spread out, are they required to wear face masks?
I think Dan, I'm going to throw a little bit to Dan because I think he saw something a little different that he had in his presentation than what I saw.
Let me jump on that. So the order says that one of the exceptions to wearing masks is when the employee works alone in an assigned work area. So that previously said when an employee works alone in an enclosed workspace. So, I'm sitting in my office right now and I'm in an enclosed office, so I'm good. I've got my face mask with me here. Show everybody that. Got my face mask here. So I put it on when I walk in from the car, when I go down and get coffee, that type of thing. But I'm sitting here by myself. Nobody's within 20 feet of me. Then as I read the order, then it's not required. So I don't know how everybody's spaced out in this particular office for the person that asked the question, but if, as it reads, if you have an assigned work area, whether that be an office, a cubby, something, and presumably you're not within any close distance of anybody else, then you ought to be able to take the mask down. But I would encourage everybody to, you don't sit at your desk all day. You don't just magically appear there. You walk in through a common entrance, that kind of thing. So maybe, wearing a mask in and out of the office, and you don't have to sit there at your computer with your mask on all day.
Also, Nick or Dan, with information changing consistently, there's been so many websites, emails that have been sent to our businesses. What direct website or source do you suggest on businesses going to get most up-to-date information?
Yeah, and in the chat box, I sent, somebody asked about like signage and things like that. I would definitely recommend the ODH website, the coronavirus .ohio. I'd say send the one that's specific to businesses. And if you use that link, and if you want to, I would say probably copy and paste that chat, what I put in the chat. CDC is also good. Again, for, CDC, as Dan indicated, is a lot about giving, not necessarily mandatory stuff or requirements, but just, obviously ODH, uses a lot of their requirements and their policies and the things that has driven a lot of what the state has done in that regard. But I would go to the coronavirus page on ODH's website. You can actually go to the coronavirus page on our website, and we just link you. We give you links to ODH and CDC's coronavirus pages. Also locally, and this is probably just more for FYI, we have worked with our local EMA. We established a website, wcjic.org, and that has a lot of links to ODH's Facebook, our Facebook, CDC Facebook. So you if you want to see some just-in-time type of things. So that's also another good source for that. But for your hard fact type stuff, I would go to the coronavirus page on ODH's page.
Yeah,
Okay,
one additional one there is the governor's office came out with a new webpage this week, which is the Responsible Restart Ohio webpage. And they've been doing a really nice job of getting some graphics out. And I know there was a question about signage and that kind of thing. Don't reinvent the wheel on some of this stuff. The governor's office and the Ohio Department of Health have already done the work, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. So use that stuff. It's a good place for information. And they seem to be updating it pretty regularly.
Before I kick things over to Tom, I know, Tom, you're going to do a wrap up. I do want you to know there's a number of questions here about products, face coverings, hand sanitizer. We have had a number of members directly with the Worcester Chamber. I know Orville Chamber likely as well, and WDC. There are ways to get hands on those products, so feel free to email us so we can make that connection. There is product out there. We would love for us to be able to get that information out. Tom?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we'll continue to work together collectively with the chambers to kick that kind of information out to you. And as Dan said, there's some really great resources that the state is kicking out as far as detailing some of the information that we talked about today, and we'll kick that out as well. So we'll make sure that we get that to you. It does keep changing, and we're going to stay on top of it. We are here to help you in any shape, way, or form. So please feel free to reach out to myself, Lori, or Justin at any time, day or night. I think everybody has our contact information, cell phones, that kind of stuff. If you don't, reach out to us and we'll make sure you have it. So I can't thank you enough, Dan and Nick, for joining us today and shedding light on this really important information. So I am excited that we are heading down the stretch of getting back to work completely. It's going to be slow. There's going to be a lot of things that will be changing, but I'm excited about the direction that we're headed now. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, well, one thing also, Tom, we will make sure that the slide deck, Dan's slide deck, is available, and then also you recorded this, correct, Tom, and it'll be available on YouTube